The chandeliers of Claridge's Hotel in London scattered golden light across crystal glasses and polite laughter. Music drifted like perfume through the air, elegant, rehearsed, and utterly hollow. In the farthest corner of the ballroom, Grace Turner stood alone, a forgotten figure in black silk, her champagne long gone flat. She hadn't planned to come.
After discovering that her fiancé had used her savings to fund a fraudulent investment venture, Grace had sworn off parties, people, and the illusion of sophistication. She'd buried herself in long shifts as a sous chef at the Mayfair Grill, where the heat of the kitchen was simpler than the chill of betrayal. But her flatmate Louise had insisted, "You can't keep hiding, Grace. Nights like this can change everything."
Now, under the glittering ceilings of London's wealthiest crowd, Grace felt like an intruder in borrowed confidence. Diamonds caught the light, businessmen exchanged knowing nods, and women compared foundations and summer estates. Everyone here seemed to know their place, except her. Then something shifted. A ripple of quiet rolled across the room, as if the air itself had decided to hold its breath. The doorman straightened, conversations faltered. Grace followed their gaze toward the entrance. A group of men in tailored black entered, their presence magnetic and unnervingly calm. At the center walked one man who didn't seem to walk at all, but command space itself, Alexander Cole. London's papers called him the silent architect of power, a financier whose empire stretched from real estate to renewable energy, with rumors of darker ventures whispered behind closed doors. Some called him a savior of failing companies, others the man who made rivals disappear. Even from across the ballroom, Grace felt it, that gravitational pull that made people look twice. He moved with the stillness of someone who never had to rush. When his eyes brushed past hers, something tightened in her chest, sharp and inexplicable. She tried to look away, to slip out unnoticed, but fate, or clumsiness, intervened. Her heel caught the edge of a marble step. Her glass toppled. A tray of hors d'oeuvre collided with the floor in a shower of silver and sound. The entire room turned. Grace dropped to her knees, cheeks burning, gathering fragments of porcelain. Then a shadow fell across her hands. Polished black shoes, the scent of sandalwood and quiet authority. "Are you hurt?" a voice asked, deep and steady. She looked up, and time slowed. Alexander Cole was crouched beside her, his hand extended, eyes the color of a midnight tide. "I'm fine," she managed. "Just clumsy." His lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Clumsy," he murmured. "Or honest, you'd be surprised how rare that is in rooms like these." As he helped her to her feet, the noise of the Gala faded into a hum. For a heartbeat, there was only his touch, the weight of his gaze, and a question forming in her mind she didn't yet dare to ask. Who was Alexander Cole really? The rescuer the headlines praised, or the storm they all feared? For the rest of the evening, Grace couldn't escape the awareness of him. Even from across the ballroom, she felt his gaze linger like an invisible thread, pulling at her composure. She told herself she was imagining it. Men like Alexander Cole didn't notice women like her. A modest cook, forgotten in the corners of other people's luxury. Still, when she finally found Louise near the champagne fountain, her friend's expression said everything. "Grace Turner," Louise whispered, eyes wide. "Did you just talk to him?" "Who?" "Don't play dumb." "Alexander Cole." Half the room nearly fainted when he walked in. The other half owes him money. Grace tried to laugh it off, but her heart was still drumming. "He just helped me up, that's all." "And looked at you like you were the only person here," Louise murmured, almost reverently. Grace rolled her eyes and reached for her coat. "Enough. One brief encounter wasn't worth this attention. She wanted the quiet anonymity of her small flat in Notting Hill, the smell of rosemary and butter from the kitchen below. But as she turned to leave, the crowd parted again. He was there, as if summoned by her thoughts. Alexander Cole, tall and impossibly calm, holding 2 glasses of wine. "You're leaving already?" His tone was polite, but behind it was something else, something closer to command. "I work early," she replied. "Chefs don't get Sunday mornings off." He studied her, a faint crease between his brows. "You cook," he said, as if confirming a detail he'd already known. "At Mayfair Grill, yes?" The fact that he knew startled her. "How?" He smiled slightly. "I make it my business to know the names of people who create rather than destroy. And from what I've heard, you're very good at what you do." Grace blinked. The room seemed to have fallen away. "You've heard of me?" "London has fewer secrets than it pretends," he said. "Besides, a man has to eat somewhere." For a long moment they simply stood there, 2 strangers framed by a crowd that dared not interrupt.
Then he set one glass on the table beside her. "You shouldn't leave empty-handed." The wine was dark and rich, the label foreign. Grace hesitated, fingers brushing the cool glass. "Thank you, but I really should go." He nodded once, as though granting permission. Yet his next words lingered long after she left the ballroom. "Miss Turner, I hope this isn't the last time we meet. Life has a way of circling back to the moments that matter." Outside, London's drizzle had softened the air.
Grace pulled her coat tight and started down the wet pavement, heart unsteady. Behind her, on the hotel balcony, Alexander Cole watched, one hand in his pocket, the other lifting his phone to his ear. "Yes," he said quietly. "I found her." By Monday morning, the gala felt like a dream blurred by steam and exhaustion. The clatter of pans and the rhythm of knives in the Mayfair Grill drowned out any thought of glittering chandeliers or dark-eyed strangers. Grace lost herself in work. The clean repetition of slicing shallots, the familiar hiss of butter meeting steel. It was safer this way. Order, precision, control. At 1:30, the restaurant's front manager, a usually unshakable woman named Harriet, appeared at the kitchen door, looking pale. "Grace," she said, "someone's asking for you." "For me?" Grace wiped her hands on a towel. There must be a mistake. "I don't think so." Harriet lowered her voice. "He's sitting at table 4. Says his name is Mr. Cole." The knife slipped slightly in Grace's hand. "Mr. Cole?" Harriet nodded. "He's not the sort of man you make wait." Grace's stomach twisted. She peeled off her apron, smoothed the creases of her uniform, and caught her reflection in the chrome fridge door. Flushed cheeks, hair tied back, traces of flour on her sleeve. A far cry from the elegant strangers at Claridge's. Still, she walked out. The dining room was quieter than usual, as if his presence had rearranged the air. Alexander Cole sat alone at table 4, perfectly at ease, a cup of black coffee untouched before him. He wasn't wearing the formal suit from the gala. Today it was a dark charcoal jacket, crisp shirt open at the collar. Power, softened by intention. "You found me," Grace said, stopping a polite distance away. "I said life circles back," he replied simply. "I wanted to see where you disappeared to after midnight." She crossed her arms, unsure whether to be flattered or alarmed. "You could have called. It's unusual, visiting a kitchen girl in her workplace." He smiled. "If I'd called, you might not have answered." Silence lingered between them. From the corner of her eye, Grace saw her co-workers pretending not to stare. She felt the weight of their curiosity pressing against her back. "What do you want, Mr. Cole?" she asked finally. He leaned back slightly, studying her as though choosing each word. Dinner. Tomorrow evening, somewhere quiet. Grace's heart stumbled. Why? Because you intrigue me. His tone carried no flirtation, only certainty. And because I think you could use a night where you're not serving anyone. Her instinct screamed caution. Men like him didn't simply invite women like her, they selected them, as they did everything else in their lives. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Then it's a perfect one, he said, standing. He placed a small black card on the table. No name, only a number embossed in silver. If you change your mind, call before 7. He gave a small nod, then left the restaurant. The door closed behind him with a soft chime that seemed louder than the kitchen noise returning around her. Grace stared at the card for a long time, its edges sharp against her fingers. She told herself she wouldn't call. She told herself that twice more before the day ended. For 24 hours, Grace told herself she wouldn't do it. She folded the small black card into a drawer, washed her hands a dozen times to erase its memory, and focused on the rhythm of ordinary things, chopping herbs, wiping counters, closing her apron strings. But by 6:30 the next evening the drawer was open again. The card lay there like a dare. You're overthinking this, she told herself. It's just dinner. When she finally pressed the digits into her phone, the line didn't even ring once. Miss Turner, said the familiar voice, calm and assured. I'll send a car at 7. She hadn't said a word. At exactly 7, a black Bentley drew up outside her narrow street in Notting Hill. The driver, polite and silent, opened the door without a question. Grace sat in the back seat, heart drumming a rhythm that didn't match the quiet jazz on the stereo. The car stopped before a discreet townhouse near Belgravia Square, where candlelight flickered behind tall windows. Alexander Cole himself stood waiting at the entrance, no entourage, no theatrics. He handed her a single white rose. You came, he said simply. You didn't really give me a chance to say no, she replied. His smile deepened. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones we don't have time to fear. Inside, the house was a world apart from the city's chaos. Shelves lined with first editions, a grand piano gleaming in the corner, the faint scent of cedar and citrus. A table for two stood beneath an old portrait, already set with wine and soft candlelight. Do you always eat like this? Grace asked, taking in the crystal glasses. Only when I have company worth it. The food was exquisite. Truffle risotto, seared sea bass, a dessert that arrived like sculpture. But Grace barely tasted any of it. Alexander's presence filled every silence. His questions were gentle but precise. Why cooking? He asked. Because food doesn't lie, she said. If it's wrong, you taste it immediately. Honesty, he murmured. A dangerous habit. He told her little about himself. That he'd grown up in Manchester, studied economics at Oxford, and inherited a complicated business from his late father. His tone suggested that was all she should know. When the meal ended, he walked her to the car himself. Outside, the city glowed under light rain. He reached out, brushed a raindrop from her hair, a gesture almost tender. I'd like to see you again, he said. Why me? She whispered. He paused. Because you look at me like I'm human. And most people stopped doing that a long time ago. Before she could reply, he nodded to the driver, who closed the door softly. As the car pulled away, Grace looked back through the window. He was still there, unmoving, hands in pockets, watching her disappear into the London rain. She didn't know whether to feel chosen or marked. The following morning, Grace woke earlier than usual. London was still grey, the air damp with that particular chill only the city knows. She stood by the small kitchen window of her flat in Notting Hill, watching buses glide through puddles, trying to convince herself that the night before had been real. The dinner, the way he'd looked at her, the way she had felt seen. By 9 o'clock she was back at the Mayfair Grill, tying her apron when Harriet, the manager, appeared again at the door. "Delivery for you," she said, eyebrows raised. "And before you ask, it's not food." A courier waited near the counter, holding a slender black box sealed with a silver ribbon. No sender's name, only her own, written in careful script. Grace hesitated. "You're sure this is for me?" "That's what the man said. Signed himself Cole Associates." The name made her stomach tighten. She carried the box into the office and opened it slowly. Inside, on dark velvet, lay a necklace, a single teardrop diamond catching every fragment of light. Beneath it, a small card in silver ink. "To match your eyes. A." Grace drew a breath, half wonder, half unease. The diamond was exquisite, obviously expensive, absurdly so. Accepting it would mean what exactly? Gratitude? Obligation? "Someone's got a secret admirer," Louise teased later when Grace told her over lunch. "It's not like that," Grace said quickly. But even as she spoke, her fingers brushed the ribbon again, tracing the texture of the gift she swore she wouldn't wear. That evening, as she locked up the restaurant, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "Did it arrive safely?" His voice was unmistakable. Calm. Close. "Mr. Cole, I can't accept something like that." "Why not?" "Because it's too much. You barely know me." There was a pause, the sound of quiet traffic behind him. "It's a necklace, Grace, not a contract." "Still." "Then think of it as a reminder of possibility." She almost laughed. "You make it sound like an investment." "In a way it is. In potential." His tone softened. "You hide too easily. You should let the world notice you." He hung up before she could reply. That night she left the box on her bedside table, its diamond catching the dim light like a heartbeat. She tried to sleep but kept turning toward it, drawn, uncertain. At midnight, a car engine idled briefly outside her building, then drove off. She sat up uneasy. When she checked her phone, a new message glowed on the screen. "Lock your doors tonight. Promise me." No name, only that same quiet authority. Grace stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Somewhere in the silence of her small London flat, she realized two things at once. That she was afraid, and that she didn't want to stop whatever had begun. Rain hammered softly against the window of Grace's flat. It was well past midnight, yet she hadn't slept. The message still glowed faintly on her phone. "Lock your doors tonight." She'd done as he said, bolted the lock, drawn the curtains, but the unease stayed. London, usually a comfort with its constant hum, felt oddly silent, as if the city were holding its breath. A floorboard creaked in the hall. She froze. Then came a gentle, deliberate knock. 3 times. Grace's heart stopped. She whispered, "Who's there?" A calm voice answered through the wood. "It's Cole's driver, Franco. Mr. Cole asked me to check on you." She peered through the peephole. A tall man in a black coat stood under the stairwell light, water dripping from his shoulders, his expression unreadable. "I'm fine," she said, keeping the chain on the door. "He wanted me to make sure you were safe. There was an incident." That word, incident, landed cold. "What kind of incident?" Franco hesitated. "Mr. Cole will explain. He'll call you in the morning." He slipped a small card under the door. "Cole Security Services, private line." Then, with a curt nod she could barely see, he turned and disappeared down the stairs. Grace stood in the quiet, the sound of rain swallowing his steps. Her mind whirled. Incident. Security. Why her? Sleep never came. At dawn, she sat by the window, clutching a mug of untouched tea, watching the first buses roll past. When her phone finally rang, she snatched it up before the first tone finished. Grace? Alexander. What's happening? His voice was lower than usual, roughened by a lack of sleep. Nothing you need to worry about. Someone tried to access private files at one of my offices last night. It's handled. And that's why you told me to lock my doors? Because when people can't reach me, they reach for those close to me. Close to me. The words unsettled her. They'd only known each other a week. Yet there it was. Possession, protection, all tangled together. You shouldn't have been dragged into this, he said after a pause. Pack a small bag. Franco will take you somewhere safe tonight. No, she said firmly. I'm not hiding because of your business. Silence, then a sigh. You're stubborn. Independent. There's a difference. He ended the call before she could answer. All day, Grace moved through work like a ghost. Every clang of metal sounded too sharp, every stranger's glance too long. When she stepped outside after closing, a black Bentley waited by the curb, headlights cutting through the drizzle. Franco opened the door.
Mr. Cole insists. Grace hesitated only a moment before sliding in. The city blurred past. Somewhere beyond the rain-streaked glass, she caught her own reflection. A woman she barely recognized. Someone already crossing a line she couldn't name. They drove through London's night until the lights thinned and the roads curved toward the coast. Grace had stopped asking where they were going. Franco's silence was firm, professional, unyielding.
At last the car turned through wrought iron gates and up a long gravel drive lined with old oaks. A white stone villa stood at the top, its windows glowing softly against the dark sky. Alexander was waiting by the entrance, no coat despite the wind. When the car stopped, he came forward and opened the door himself. Grace, he said quietly, I'm sorry it had to be like this. You could have asked, she replied, stepping out into the salt air. Instead, you sent a car like I'm a parcel. His jaw tightened. Guilt or frustration, she couldn't tell. It wasn't a request I could make over the phone. You weren't safe in London. Safe from what? He hesitated, then motioned her inside. The villa was beautiful. Marble floors, wide windows overlooking a restless sea, candles flickering along the walls. The kind of place meant to disarm, to impress. A rival of mine crossed a line, he said finally. Someone I've dealt with before. He knows your name. Grace felt her stomach twist. Because of you. Because of us, he corrected. And I won't let anyone use you to get to me. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they landed like a warning. Dinner had been set and 2 plates untouched. He poured her wine, but she didn't drink. You move through people's lives like it's strategy, she said. Why me? Why the dinners, the gifts, the car outside my flat? Alexander looked at her for a long time. Because you make me forget what I am, he said. And that terrifies me. Outside, the sea crashed against the cliffs. For a heartbeat, she saw something raw in him. Not power, not arrogance, but loneliness. It made her chest ache. You can stay here tonight, he said softly. There are guards outside. You'll be safe. And you? I'll be here. I have to make a call. To end this mess once and for all. His phone was already in his hand. He walked to the terrace, his voice low, controlled, lethal.
Grace watched through the glass as he spoke in that tone that brokered both mercy and threat. When he returned, the mask had slipped back into place. It's over, he said simply. You mean handled, she whispered. He didn't deny it. Later, when she lay awake in the guest room, she could still hear the sea and the faint echo of his voice outside. Dealt with, handled, words that could mean 100 things, none of them harmless.
And yet, even as fear crept through her, part of her longed for the sound of his footsteps coming closer. Morning arrived quietly. The sea had turned silver under a pale sky, waves brushing the cliffs like breath. Grace woke to the sound of gulls and the faint aroma of coffee drifting through the corridor. For a moment she forgot where she was, until the taste of salt in the air brought it all back. She found Alexander on the terrace, sleeves rolled up, staring out toward the horizon. The night's sharpness had drained from his face, but something in his eyes had hardened, the look of a man who had done what he believed necessary. You didn't sleep, she said softly. Sleep is a luxury when you live by choices that don't forgive mistakes. He gestured toward the sea. Everything looks peaceful from here. That's the trick of distance. Down there the tide keeps breaking. Endless, relentless. Grace folded her arms against the wind. And which are you, Alexander? The calm or the tide? He smiled faintly. Both. They ate breakfast in silence, sunlight spilling over the marble floor. When she placed her cup down, she noticed a small envelope beside her plate, her name written in his precise hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a deed. Her name printed beside the address of a property in the West End, a restaurant space, fully paid. Her throat tightened. You bought this? No, he said. I'm giving it to you. So you can build something that's yours. Not borrowed, not hidden. Grace stared at him. That's not a gift, that's freedom, he interrupted gently. If you choose it. She shook her head. Freedom doesn't come from what someone gives you. It comes from walking away. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Then walk away. But know that the world out there won't keep you safer than I will. Grace rose, the morning light glinting off the diamond at her throat. Slowly she unclasped it and set it on the table. The tiny stone caught the sun, a fragment of beauty balanced on the edge of danger. I don't want to be safe, she said quietly. I just want to be real. He didn't move to stop her. Only his eyes followed as she walked toward the door, her footsteps echoing across the marble. At the top of the drive, Franco waited beside the car. When she looked back, Alexander was still on the terrace, a dark silhouette against the glittering sea. Neither waved, neither needed to. The ride back to London was long and silent. In her bag lay the deed she hadn't returned. Heavy, uncertain, alive with possibility. Somewhere between the coastline and the city, Grace realized she didn't yet know whether she was leaving him behind or carrying him with her. And perhaps that was the truest kind of freedom. Ending CTA. If you were Grace, would you have stayed or walked away? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next story.